Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on this second day of the Astana International Forum. My name is Darren Spink, and I am a US-based research fellow with the Henry Jackson Society, and it is a pleasure to be back in Kazakhstan. 7 months ago, I had the opportunity to speak here at the Astana Think Tank Forum, where we discussed the very issue we will focus on today, middle power diplomacy. As I emphasized during my visit to Kazakhstan last October, the global order has shifted from US-led unipolarity to a multipolar reality, a transition that President Trump's restructuring of global trade and defense policy has only accelerated. In this new landscape, middle powers like Kazakhstan have a vital role to play in balancing great power competition. Kazakhstan's position as a supply chain anchor, particularly through the Middle Corridor, offers a stabilizing force for global trade by reducing vulnerabilities to external shocks. And as I wrote in a recent report on Kazakhstan's strategic importance as a middle power, the country's multi-vector foreign policy enables it to maintain strategic neutrality while cultivating strong relationships with both its powerful neighbors and the West. In this emerging world order, middle powers will increasingly shape international norms, build issue-based alliances, and serve as mediators for global challenges, whether through diplomacy, economic strategy, or regional security arrangements. Joining me today are 4 prestigious panelists with deep expertise in multilateral institutions, global governance, and middle power diplomacy, each of whom brings a unique perspective to this important discussion. Our panelists today are Akan Rakhmatulin, Kazakhstan's first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. Deputy Minister Rakhmatulin previously served as Kazakhstan's permanent representative to the United Nations, ambassador to Pakistan, Director of the Department of Multilateral Cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations. Also joining us today is Secretary General Kairat Saribay of the Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia. Secretary General Saribay has served as Kazakhstan's Deputy Foreign Minister, Executive Director of SICA, and as Ambassador to Turkey, Germany, Austria, and Slovenia, as well as permanent representative of Kazakhstan to the international organizations in Vienna. Also joining us is Michel Duclos, Special Advisor for Geopolitics at France's Institut Montaigne. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing any names today. Ambassador Duclos was previously France's ambassador to Switzerland and Syria, diplomatic advisor to the French Minister of the Interior, and Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations. And finally, Ambassador Thomas Greminger, Executive Director of the Geneva Center for Security Policy. Ambassador Greminger formerly served as Secretary General of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and as Switzerland's ambassador to the OSCE, the United Nations, and other international organizations in Vienna. I'd like to start with First Deputy Minister Rakhmatulin. As I noted, sir, during my opening remarks, multipolarity is here, and its future will, in large part, be shaped by the middle powers represented at this conference. My question has 2 parts. First, how does Kazakhstan define its role as a middle power, and how does it seek to influence the rapidly evolving global trade and security architectures, particularly through existing multilateral institutions like the UN and global economic platforms? And secondly, if you could discuss what specific diplomatic tools does Kazakhstan employ to balance relationships between the major or great powers and multilateral institutions while advancing Kazakhstan's national interests?
Thank you very much, Darren. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear co-panelists. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. This is really very interesting and important topic to speak about the multipolarity and the role of the middle powers in this multipolar world. And Darin, at your opening remarks, you mentioned that there was to some extent, unipolar. Before that, it was bipolar when it was Soviet Union, but then it became a unipolar. Then it's turned into be a multipolar world. And of course, we see the new centers or focuses of power, the focus of force, and we can just name just some of them. And it's like Russia, China, European Union, African Union, many other countries who are, evolving in new conditions, and it entails, both opportunities and challenges. Of course, opportunities that these countries may define the world they want to live in, and just to be equal partners and hearing and knowing needs of each other. The challenges are also numerous. They may face some kind of resistance from, as we say, bigger power, and some kind of situation where they are kind of prevented to influence the global situation. Actually, there is no clear and legally agreed definition of who middle power is, but if we just could find out the common denominator, I would say that it's a country which is quite sustainable, who is very active not being like having great trade turnover with others, but country which is deeply and actively involved into international areas. And here I just wanted to refer to my experience when we were part of the United Nations Security Council. First it was our campaigning, and then we were serving there. And before joining that, we were warned that you have to be very cautious and to be very sober, because it's an entity of P5, 5 power countries, and I mean permanent members, and elected 10, so-called E10. So, and it's not necessarily that the voices of E10 will be definitely listened and heard by P5. Like big guys will be doing their own work, what they used to do, and just telling the elected or non-permanent members of the Security Council, please guys, go and play somewhere on the sandbox, don't spoil with us, I mean, don't interfere with us. But eventually, and these days, it shows that it was not the case. The voice of so-called E10, so elected or non-permanent members of the Security Council, is really heard and taken into account. And this, I may say that this E10 may refer to what middle power is. Countries which are quite active and not just benevolent with what they have already. And just wanted to outline the role, why middle powers are so important these days. It's just because they balance interests between big powers. The balance is the main prerequisite for peace and stability. If there is no balance, it's absolutely clear that there is no peace and sustainable development, whatever it entails. Secondly, the middle powers often act as the peacemakers or mediators, and just this example of Kazakhstan, I may refer to different various initiatives we put forward from the time we've got our independence, and it's consistently moving that forward. Apart from that, I just wanted also to mention that about active participation of middle powers in various arrangements, be it political arrangement or regional global organizations. And these countries are really trying to, as I said at the very beginning, to change the status quo and to produce the ideas or produce forward-looking vision just to overcome the impasse sometimes and very often our world standing in. If I just may refer to the second question, what kinds of tools Kazakhstan may use being the middle power, I think yes, Kazakhstan is a middle power in terms of its classical terms. We try to be, especially in the Eurasian region, as vocal, as active, and as constructive as possible. Of course, it is stipulated by various factors. First, of course, is geopolitical location. You know, our neighborhood, geographical neighborhood, it's not very easy, particularly these days. We are the biggest landlocked region, and Kazakhstan, being the biggest landlocked country, is trying to be very constructive in, you know, in overcoming this vulnerability and to go further and not to be isolated with this, within this geographic reality, but to go further on. And this what identifies our foreign policy, which has been, as we call it, multivectoral or multidimensional, and I think it justified what we've chosen. We are friends to all and enemies to none. This again, one of the main, I would say, characteristic of the middle power. And as an example, I may say that, referring back to that, we are trying to actively participate in different arrangements and to produce some kind of, you know, acceptable product or acceptable initiative that would lead our world to a safer world. I just wanted to name some of them. It's withdrawal of our nukes 33 years ago, and I remember that there were some countries, some powers who warned us not to do that, but it should be one kind of, you know, the nuclear stick in this part of the world, but we very deliberately and without any hesitation just got rid of that. Then our multilateral initiatives, for example, the convening and creation of SICA, the Conference on Interaction in Confidence Building Measures. I think I pronounced it right this time. And we have Secretary General of SICA who would later speak about that. And no one expected that it would turn into the real full-fledged regional organization, a security organization, and confidence building organization, but this is the case. Apart from that, of course, the initiatives like, you know, to create International Agency for Biosafety and Security, because the biological weapon or biological substance remain the only, you know, type of weapon unattended. If we speak about chemical weapon or nuclear weapon, there are secretaries, there are some, you know, technical assistance or support staff. You know that chemicals are in The Hague and nuclear are in Vienna. In this case, we try to promote this idea, and it received its support from the globe when we moved forward this initiative. And the latest one I just wanted to refer is the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, which you know, established the United Nations Center in Almaty for Sustainable Development for Central Asia and Afghanistan. And you can judge from the name that in this region, including Afghanistan, the United Nations efforts and the United Nations work will be very demanded and coordinated in a proper manner. And it's not only about coordination, it's all about also the synergy of the efforts. So, and just concluding my maybe introductory remarks, I want to refer to what our President said yesterday at his statement at the plenary. Let me quote it. Kazakhstan firmly believes that middle powers should have a vested interest in an equitable and inclusive global order, which needs to be reassessed and overhauled. Accordingly, middle powers should be ready to shoulder more multilateral responsibility, end of quote. And dear colleagues, the real world is changing very rapidly, and in the context of this multipolarity, the middle powers are becoming not the just secondary players or someone who is to play aside in their sandbox. But if I may just use this allegory, like bigger powers, they are like building blocks, bigger blocks, but they cannot withstand without having some kind of cement within, like middle powers as we are. So, and I think that the global architecture is, middle powers in the global architecture is very important. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, and it was very helpful. it was very helpful that you provided a definition for middle powers, and I think it was extremely illustrative how you described the balance of interests between the ability for middle powers to balance interests between the great powers. And I'd like to, during the other speakers' remarks, I'd like to also invite you to provide your own definitions of middle powers if you so wish. And for all speakers, please feel free to also respond to anything that a previous speaker said. Secretary General Saribay, SICA brings together several rising middle powers, including Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, two key nodes in the Trans-Caspian International Transport Corridor. I also have two questions for you. In your view, first, how can regional confidence-building mechanisms help middle powers navigate great power competition while preserving regional autonomy, particularly through multilateral organizations? And secondly, as Secretary General of SICA and a former diplomat closely involved in regional integration, how do you see the role of the Middle Corridor as a strategic platform for middle powers to shape connectivity, trade, and regional stability across Eurasia?
Thank you so much. Yes, indeed, the role of middle powers in the current multipolarity, although the Secretary General of UN said that we left unipolarity, but we still approaching the multipolarity because we are in the stage of transformation. And I guess that multipolarity doesn't mean that we should have 5 polars or related to only the economic power or the possessing of nucleus. I think that multipolarity can be also considered as the multi-coalitions and multi-centered world order, which will be more balanced. And this multipolarity means it is already the balance of major powers in between. And indeed, the role of middle powers, we cannot exaggerate. And we should not also exaggerating, because we should understand that middle power, by definition, is a middle one. We cannot build the blocks, I mean military blocks. And this is probably the most distinctive thing. SICA, that I do represent, although I will deliver all remarks on my own behalf, and my observations will not bind any of SICA member states, although I do believe that my humble experience tell me that I have to be very cautious because I'm still in office. So what is the idea of connectivity? Indeed, middle powers need to be connected, because if you don't have any like-minded, if you don't have any coalition behind, your power is limited. And what is the best tool to get this power is a multilateralism. And that is why I think that SICA is a not initiative of middle power. SICA was created by middle powers, in plural. Because, yes, in 1992, when then the president of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, proposed this idea to convene the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures, it was idea of the country just emerged as an independent state. And it was at the very first statement of the newly independent country. But the vision was there. Why? Because Kazakhstan badly needed the better collective security network, and we believe that preventive diplomacy is much more better for our international environment to concentrate our focus to our own state development. So that is why, in order to create a better environment, in order to create a predictable environment, in order to create the collective security system, it was proposed and it was well responded. Maybe at the initial stage it was only 15, but nowadays we are at 28, 90% of the continent, including largest states 4 out of 10 largest states of the world are in SICA. Russia, China, India, Kazakhstan. 21 out of 30 major cities of the world are located in Asia. But what we observed during the pandemic, for instance, and what we do see currently in the world affected by geopolitical division, we see that Asia is not well connected, not only in terms of transport and transit and logistics, also in terms of people-to-people connectivity, financial connectivity, whatever. So that is why I think that connectivity is a major priority of all SICA chairmanships, consecutive chairmanships. So Kazakhstan started, Turkey moved on, China, during actually their presidency in SICA, they promoted the mega project Belt and Road, or Tajikistan, the landlocked country in Central Asia. Then again, Kazakhstan, and during the last presidency of Kazakhstan in SICA, President Tokayev put forward the idea to establish the Council on Sustainable Connectivity. Nowadays, Azerbaijan also very much aligned with the idea of improving connectivity, and the slogan of Azerbaijani chairmanship is Stronger SICA, Connectivity, Digitalization and Sustainable Growth in Asia. You see that connectivity means not only the transport and logistic. Connectivity means in all kind of connectivity, including the people-to-people and intercultural exchanges. Because Asia is the largest continent, Asia is very diverse continent, Asia has limited knowledge about its sub-regions. But SICA bringing together Sri Lanka and Russian Federation, Bahrain and Mongolia, Korea and even Egypt. What we do have within our membership is very unique. We have the equal footing for Israel, Palestine. There is no any other international platform where these two states have equal voices. So I think that connectivity and the transport connectivity is quite important, because this is the major confidence building measure. If you are connected by dialogue, by trade, by economic relations, that reduces the potential of conflict, although it's not very classic, not very ideal one. But however, this is the confidence building measures. So that is why connectivity for Asia, connectivity for SICA is a top priority. And we should not prioritize only one particular corridor because Kazakhstan chairing SICA, that is why we should focus only on middle corridor. This is not the right way to address the connectivity generally, because within the continent there are so many different corridors, but definitely Central Asia or Caucasus can play the central role by definition, because without Central Asia, without Caucasus, you cannot move connectivity further. That is why enhancing different transport corridors within the Asia will serve to the global trade. And with global trade, with global economic development, we do believe that this nexus between development and security will have its own merits. Again, it's not an easy one. SICA works on the basis of consensus, which means that we do have 28 veto rights. So we have not P5, we do have 28 permanent members with the veto right. It's very difficult, but despite of this strict consensus rule, we're moving forward, and it shows that SICA member states desperately need more spheres, ideas to be connected with each other. So this is the tool of SICA. Nowadays, SICA giving the status of middle power to Kazakhstan as a convener, as the initiator of this process. You see that not only you, middle power, can move forward some ideas, but ideas giving you power that you probably didn't have before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. Your remarks were very enlightening, particularly about the diversity of transit corridors, and more importantly, the importance of transport connectivity for confidence building, equating to confidence building measures. I think that's something that I invite the other speakers to expand upon during their remarks, and I appreciate your comments. Ambassador Duclos, France has long played a distinctive role in international affairs, combining strategic independence with deep multilateral engagement. In your view, how can middle powers like France contribute to shaping a more balanced and effective global order as multipolarity deepens, particularly at a time when international institutions are under strain and great power competition is accelerating?
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you very much for the organizers of this fantastic forum for inviting me. Speaking about France as a middle power, maybe I will make a couple of remarks on two different levels, status and policies. In terms of status, France retains still today some characteristics of a great power. The fact that it is a permanent member of the Security Council, also a nuclear power. I would add to that maybe global diplomacy and a kind of culture of being a great power. In the same times, in terms of GDP, population, surface, it's very clear that we're much more a middle power than a great power. And I would say the more we are moving in the time and the more the international landscape is changing, and the closer we are to a middle power. I'm old enough to remember the 70s when President Giscard d'Estaing was the first one to use the word middle power to describe France. He triggered a very big shock in the public opinion in France. And at that time, it's true that in terms of GDP, for instance, which were extraordinarily ahead with China, for instance, or India. So it's difficult for us to imagine the world at that time when the classic European powers were much more wealthy than the current biggest countries in economic terms. I mentioned Europe, and I would say that France being to some extent a great power, to some extent a middle power, it's also a European power. And that's very important because it means that we share our sovereignty with the European institutions. And also we share more than that. We share a destiny, and we have a kind of solidarity. And in the current situation, it's difficult to think about French foreign policy in making a difference between the interest of the nation and the interest of Europe. Both things are more or less confounded. That's for the status. In terms of policies, we have a long tradition of trying to reach out other middle powers. But maybe I would start with a historical remark. During the 60s of the past century, when de Gaulle was a president and created this notion of France as an independent country and so on, we were the first one to have a kind of multi-alignment policy. It was a time of the East-West confrontation, and de Gaulle launched a policy of détente, saying, yes, we belong to the West, but we want to have good relations with the East, and we want to overcome this difference and create a different world. It brought a lot of prestige to France. For instance, we were the first Western country to recognize communist China as a representative of China. And in France, there is a great attachment to this tradition. One of the problems for us is that precisely multi-alignment is not anymore the specialty of France. It has become the mantra for a lot of other countries in the world, precisely those middle powers we are talking about. Also in terms of policy, we have started now more than a decade ago to have what we call strategic relations with countries such as India, Brazil, Indonesia, Kazakhstan. And so we are very much aware that our natural partners are in this world. And also, it's not only a question of bilateral partnership, it's also a question of working on issues, global issues, which should unite the world, such as the climate change. And you may remember the Paris conference on the climate change and things like that. But in the current circumstances, where things are again changing with the return of great power competitions, the risk of war, and things like that, the danger of new divisions, new tensions, it seems to me that for us, we have a couple of policy questions. For instance, should we start creating a kind of club of middle powers? The same way that Russia and China had the fantastic idea of setting up the BRICS, in which they have a joint platform with countries which are middle powers from the south, when they are themselves more than middle powers from the east. Is it conceivable for France, Britain, Germany, for instance, and other middle powers from Europe to create a platform with some middle powers from the global south? Or should we continue like we do for the time being with multilateral institutions on one side and bilateral strategic relations on the other side? I think we have not solved this question for the time being. But my suggestion would be that if we want to stabilize the world, I mean, we should not exaggerate. It's not the middle powers which are going to change things in terms of big power, great power competitions. But at least we can try to work together to add an element of stability, a degree of stability in the world. I think that at some point it would be useful to have this kind of platform uniting middle powers from Europe and middle powers from elsewhere.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Duclos. And I appreciate you posing the question whether or not there should be an established club of middle powers. And I think that's a wonderful question that if any of the other speakers would like to contribute to, I encourage you to do so. I also found your historic perspective enlightening, and appreciated your illustration of how France has defining characteristics as both a great power and a middle power, and also your remarks about the challenges of balancing the national interests of France as a middle power versus the bloc interests of the European Union. These are wonderful thoughts to expand upon. Ambassador Greminger, given your leadership at both the OSCE and the Geneva Center for Security Policy, how do you see middle powers contributing to regional stability and effective multilateral engagement, particularly in an era marked by geopolitical fragmentation and shifting alliance structures?
Well, thank you very much, Darren, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me to this forum and for the chance to take part in this really exciting panel discussion. In the allotted 5 minutes, I will try to make 5 points, and I will start with definitions, move on to status, to norms and rules, cooperation among middle powers, and end on bridge building. So let me start with definitions. What do we mean by a middle power? Has it to do with geography? Well, if so, then according to Halford and Mackinder, that has been quoted already this morning, well, Kazakhstan is the ultimate middle power. Or is it more than that? Is it countries that are situated between great powers, both geographically and politically? Sometimes in Europe, we refer to countries that are situated between Russia and the West as the so-called in-betweens. I know it's not a very nice term, but we refer to countries like Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, Armenia. Is there an economic dimension to being a middle power? Do you have to be at least a middle-income country to be a serious middle power? I suppose. I think where I'm pretty sure is that if in the next few years there is a trend towards great powers exerting regional hegemony, more countries will feel like middle powers, and more countries will have to navigate their way between China, Russia, and the United States. This takes me to my second point, status. Being a middle power clearly does not mean to be neutral or to be formally non-aligned. And I think the term Michel used of multi-alignment is probably the proper one. Again, here Kazakhstan is a case in point. You have good relations with Russia, with China, United States, with the European Union. And the point I'm trying to make here is, I think, as a middle power, you don't have to choose one over the other. I think that is important. And diversification, when it comes to political, commercial relations, that enables you a degree of flexibility and a degree of strategic autonomy. And again, this points to a multi-vector foreign policy as we see it in Kazakhstan. moving on to norms and rules. This said, middle powers, I believe, have a vested interest in an international system that has common norms, that is predictable, that is based on the rule of law. Otherwise, they get caught in the middle of great power fights or become themselves victims of aggression. And indeed, I believe middle powers should defend an international system that protects their interests and their sovereignty. And in that respect, here I kind of support the idea that Michel has just referred to. I would actually see much closer cooperation among middle powers in the years to come. Now, what format would that take? Would it be through multilateral bodies, regional organizations? Would it be SICA? Would it be the OEC? I wouldn't, I would obviously support that very much. Probably we see different forms. We see what I like to call flexilateralism. And this takes me to my last point, and that is, I think middle powers can also be bridge builders. And I think an excellent example is the role neutral and non-aligned countries played in the run-up to what then became the Helsinki Final Accord in 1975. In that process, in that Helsinki process, these countries, they played a decisive role in facilitating between the big powers. But we also have other examples today. We have the Emirates, we have the Qataris, we have Brazilians, we have the Saudi Arabia. Of course, well, I should also mention my home country, Switzerland, engaging in facilitation. And of course, we see Kazakhstan with its quiet diplomacy, with its work as a mediator on a number of issues. In conclusion, in a world that I would, see as increasingly tripolar, perhaps the majority of states will somehow be middle powers, and middle powers that would have a self-interest and a collective interest to shape and uphold international norms, to remain agile and to adapt to a unpredictable world order. And I think they clearly have an interest to stick together wherever possible and to be bridge builders in order not to be caught in the middle of great power, rivalry, or hegemony.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Greminger. Thank you, Ambassador Greminger. And I appreciated your point on stressing how Kazakhstan's successful multi-vector foreign policy is a defining characteristic of a middle power, and your final remarks were very important as well, that it's the role of middle powers to shape and uphold international laws and adapt to an unpredictable world order. So I think that's a very important takeaway for this first part of our discussion. As we are running slightly behind schedule, and I was hoping that we would be able to allow for some Q&A, I'm going to ask a second round of questions to the panelists, but I'm also going to invite each of our panelists to offer their own closing statement as part of this, as part of the answer to the question, and to feel free to respond to any of the other previous panelists as well, to reflect on the themes raised in the first set of questions, and whether it's the role of middle powers in today's shifting global order, or how multilateral institutions can be strengthened to reflect emerging realities. Deputy Mr. Rahmatullah, building on the previous question I had for Secretary Sarabay, there was a recent Baku Dialogues paper which proposed the creation of a dedicated development bank for the Middle Corridor. I want to ask you, if it's possible to answer, how does the government of Kazakhstan see a need for establishing such an institution to drive infrastructure investment and regional integration? And then secondly, if possible, as a former permanent representative to the United Nations, you clearly understand the symbolic and strategic significance of where multilateral institutions are headquartered. So if this development bank was created in the future, if you'd like to answer this, in your view, where should such a bank be headquartered?
Yeah, thank you very much. If I may start from the second part of your question, we are fine with, with its location. It may go as the other development banks. Where are they located? European, be it European or development bank, if it comes from, like, if you mentioned it as an initiative from BRICS, right? The BRICS initiative, development bank.
This initiative is from, it was released in a essay in Baku Dialogues within the last few days. It's a concept for a middle corridor development bank, which would help engage both the public sector and the private sector within Central Asia, as well as some of the Western powers and Arab Gulf powers to drive investment into the region.
Yeah, right. About this geographic location, I think in this globalized world, digitalized world, it doesn't matter where it's located. The main thing is that it should serve its purpose and provide the best services whenever demanded. And coming back to the first part of your question, it's how we see that. Indeed, as I mentioned in my first answer, that we are biggest landlocked region and we are biggest landlocked country, and for us it's extremely and existentially important to develop our export routes and to expand our transit and transport opportunities, because for us it's as I said, existentially important to go out, to go to the external markets, and we consider the middle corridor one of those routes that may serve to that purpose, to ramify and to diversify our export and not to be dependent. So it's just reflected in the saying that don't keep all the eggs in one basket. So we can just use either way to trade, to cooperate, to export, and we are paying very particular attention along with our regional partners, and we are being part of the BRI, Bridge and Road Initiative, and being part of ancient Silk Road initiative, the Silk Road. We are part of that road, which being on the crossroad of the continents, crossroad of the trade, and Kazakhstan and I think countries of the region in the wider term, they are all supportive to that idea, and I think we are ready to work on that.
Thank you very much. Your comments were very important regarding the strategic importance of diversifying supply chains, transit corridors, et cetera. Secretary General Sarabay, in my recent report on Kazakhstan's strategic importance as a middle power partner for the United Kingdom, I noted that the UK could leverage Astana's balanced foreign policy to foster cooperation on global challenges such as climate change, sustainable development, and energy security. From your perspective as Secretary General of SICA, how can Western powers like the UK and the United States more effectively engage with Kazakhstan and other SICA members, not just bilaterally, but through multilateral forums to advance these shared priorities? And secondly, do you see scope for deeper UK and US participation in SICA-led dialogues or initiatives?
Unfortunately, I have to disappoint you. We are talking about the cooperation among the Asian countries. Definitely, you cannot isolate this huge continent from the global issues. And definitely, it is my humble opinion that we should learn lessons from the past, not only from our common mistakes or some mistakes, but also from the best lessons, best achievements, just to maybe multiply them or to incorporate it in your own life. Well, I'm not going to refer to any SICA partnership with EU because we don't have it, but we have the partnership with UN and UN institutions. We have some partnership with regional organizations, but based usually in Asia, like Organization for Economic Cooperation or Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We do have some partnership with League of Arab States, and we're open to other partnerships with other stakeholders. But you absolutely rightly mentioned that we should consider not only the unresolved issues on the ground, be it territorial claims, be it some particular other military-related issues, because within the Asia we do have some conflicts, some of them protracted. Time to time they are coming up again, and nowadays in West Asia we have a bloody conflict, unfortunately. But despite all that, member states, however, seeking the areas where they can cooperate. And for instance, the climatic diplomacy is one of the topic. President Tokayev, during Kazakh chairmanship in SICA, proposed to host the first ever ministerial level conference on environmental issues. And it was very successful. We defined some niches within this huge environmental agenda where the SICA member states can accelerate the cooperation, of course, with invitation of global stakeholders. Recently in Dushanbe, or at that days also in Dushanbe, it's an international conference on glaciers. Unfortunately, I couldn't go there, but my deputy is there, and SICA organized the side event with participation of other players, UNEP and others. Azerbaijan, our current chairmanship, they just hosted last November the global event COP29, and they would like to promote it further because the tangible results of COP29 in Baku is very much great achievement, and we should pursue that not only on a global level but also on a regional level. Another case, we have, for instance, during Astana summit, agreed that it will be, we adopted actually the roadmap to promote the global counter-terrorist strategy of UN. So this alignment between the global level and regional level brings us to the international partnership. Today, unfortunately, because of the geopolitical division and very severe situation in some parts of Europe, I cannot say that we can promote direct contact with some particular countries that you mentioned. But definitely, through the multilateral arrangements, through the multilateral platforms, I believe that the international experience must be used on our platform. And this is the win-win situation, again, despite some political issues between some particular states. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. I appreciate you outlining SICA's cooperation with multilateral platforms. And one line in particular struck me, learning lessons from the past to advance and succeed in the future. And I hope middle powers like Kazakhstan and other rising middle powers can encourage great powers to live by this quote. Ambassador Duclos, you have previously written compellingly about a corridor of middle powers, which you were touching upon briefly about your club of middle powers, that links the new world of the Indo-Pacific with the historical weight of the European continent. At last October's think tank forum, you also noted that a major challenge for middle powers lies in their ability to foster peace and reform existing multilateral institutions to better reflect the interests of the global South. If I've misunderstood either point, excuse me on that, but taken together, how can middle powers from both the global South and global North work cooperatively to reduce the risks posed by rising great power competition And what practical steps might they take to bridge interests and build a more inclusive and resilient international order?
Well, it's a huge question, so maybe I'll try to be very simple and very short in my answer. 10 years ago, when I started to think about those things, I thought that there should be some functional equivalent to the BRICS, uniting some of the European powers plus some important countries in the south. I must say that in the current situation, I'm afraid it's too late or too early again. You can't close completely the option. But maybe the best way to continue would be to have first a low-level, discrete concertation club. When you would take, for instance, some of the countries of the G20, both from Europe and from the South, plus external countries like Kazakhstan, and one or two big African countries. So you would have a mix of close partners inside the G20 plus close partners outside the G20. And those people, they should be meeting at least at the beginning at the level of the Sherpas, for instance, of the heads of state, at a working level. And only progressively, if you see that they are more and more aware of some common platforms, you could elevate to the level of ministers and maybe one day heads of state. With such an approach, you would have an occasion to discuss in a more informal and free way, identify your real common interest. Because for the time being, we don't really know what people are ready to fight for. We say multilateral world, things like that, multilateral institutions. But it's only with working together in a small group of people who could trust each other that you can define more precisely a common platform. So in a very short way, that would be my recommendation.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Duclos. And I think your points on low-level...
Something which is very important, of course, is that the process should be initiated at an equal level between one or two big countries from various worlds. For instance, an important European country and an important global south country. It should not be us who would be leading the process. It should be right from the beginning on a level of partnership between those countries.
Thank you very much, sir. And I hope when we were discussing the corridor of middle powers that it is too early for that to succeed and not too late. I'm an eternal optimist as an American, so I'm going to go with it's too early, and I remain confident that could be successful. Ambassador Greminger, I read with great interest your remarks at the Geneva Center for Security Policies Processes of International Negotiation Conference. You concluded your remarks by posing a very timely and important question at the time. How can multilateral negotiations align with geopolitical shifts, balancing the interests of traditional major powers while acknowledging the growing influence of emerging actors and coalitions? That conference took place roughly 6 weeks before President Trump's inauguration. In light of the significant shifts in global power dynamics since then, how do you now view the role of multilateral negotiations and the influence of emerging actors and coalitions in shaping this rapidly evolving international order?
I don't think that fundamentally anything has changed. I think, what I still would call for is inclusive platforms for dialogue. And if, governmental processes are not possible because, the political environment is not mature enough, well, then you can work on an expert level, with track 2 diplomacy approaches to kind of try to prepare the ground, then escalate. I think what I see, and a need that I perceive particularly now since President Trump came into office, on the one hand, we have to acknowledge he brought about important political impulses into a number of conflicts. And I think while 6 months ago, 9 months ago, it was more or less a taboo to think about ceasefire negotiations, to political processes that would bring the hostilities in Ukraine to an end. I think there is now a common understanding that this is an objective for the weeks, months to come. I think what I see missing in all of these discussions is process expertise. How to structure a process of negotiations. What I see missing is a sense of patience. Conflicts normally are not resolved within a couple of days of negotiations. They take. I hope I'm not right with the conflict in Ukraine, but I mean, remember the Korean conflict took 2 years to negotiate. There are other conflicts that took even longer. So I think there needs to be much more patience also on the political level, on the level of media. And I think there needs to be this process expertise that is, of course, very much available. We learned a lot over the last 30 years on how to manage and resolve conflict, but bring that also to the right actors on the governmental level. That seems to be, to me, a major challenge these days.
Thank you, Ambassador, and it was very interesting and important that I think that you noted that the White House has been effective at changing the narrative in some of these awful global conflicts that are occurring, and hopefully the change of the narratives will lead to a constructive and lasting peace ultimately. We are running against the clock a bit, but it would be wonderful to, if possible, to take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. I'm not sure if there is a dedicated microphone in the audience, but if you do have a question, please raise your hand. Please provide your name and your affiliation. Ma'am? Please go ahead, ma'am, in the blue.
We need mic to the floor. Do we have any microphone?
Okay.
It's coming. Just coming slowly.
And in the meantime, after we have these 2 questions, I invite the panelists just to give a 1-minute comment to close things up. And the question that I came up with at next year's Astana International Forum, what will we say regarding the middle power's effectiveness at changing and shaping multipolarity? Easy 1-minute question.
Вопрос.
Here's my question. Here's my question.
Сіздер қалай ойлайсыздар?
What do you think the conflict in Ukraine, how most quickly it could be resolved. You said that we should be more tolerant in waiting, but at the same time we know that so many people are finding death.
The conflict between Russia and Ukraine will end. Everybody talking about patient, but the lives are there. So the life matters. That is why. What is your expectation when the conflict will end? It's easy question in the end of this panel.
Indeed. Thank you, Secretary General, for your translation. And I think maybe each panelist could provide their input on this question, and please reflect upon my question as well. Where do you think things will stand in 1 year as far as the ability of middle powers to shape this multipolar world? And we'll wrap things up from there. Thank you. Deputy Minister, if you'd like to start.
To be very short, we all pray that this conflict will end soon, but we cannot say when. But we all expect that all the efforts from President Trump, from others, they will play its role, and the wisdom and political will prevail. But not sure. Thank you.
And if you'd like to comment on where do you see middle powers shaping the multipolar world 1 year when we're all sitting at the Astana International Forum again? How do you see middle powers shaping the multipolar world in 1 year? What will we say at the AIF?
If I may refer to what Ambassador Greminger said, that it's not overnight activity, and I don't think that the multipolar world will change overnight or in 1 year, but it will, I hope that it will get some more clear definition maybe this time, or clear form of what multipolar world is and what middle powers are.
Thank you. I think the key takeaway there is it will require patience and determination. Secretary General.
Once we discussed in the OSCE in Hofburg at the Permanent Council meeting on the extension of the SMM mission in Ukraine. And no, it was actually the appointment of a new head of the SMM mission. And I expressed my wish that the 3-year terms of the head of the SMM mission will be enough, and we will not come back to Hofburg in order to elect another one. So with the hope that the conflict in Ukraine will end. That was roughly 6 or 7 years ago. And we see that, unfortunately, we have indeed no any SMM anymore, but the reasons are others. So indeed, we cannot predict when. It's the goodwill of parties involved, and the level of compromise, on readiness to compromise. I totally agree with young lady, any life matters, that's true, but time to time, diplomacy cannot do everything, but diplomacy can create conducive fora for that. So I believe that the conflict will end rather sooner, because we have at least some positive signs. And I do believe in 1 year from now, we will have a better world. Because I am a big fan of John Lennon. But also I am doing something in order to get these phrases in the Imagine. Maybe no borders will be difficult, but the community of like-minded, peaceful mankind. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. I too, share your fandom for John Lennon, and also agree with you completely that in 1 year, when we're sitting back at the AIF conference, that the world will be a better place, and I hope that the I share your optimism that the war in Ukraine will end as well. Ambassador Duclos, if you'd like to address the question as well as your thoughts on where the world will stand in 1 year.
On the question, I would say we need a ceasefire now, precisely for the reasons you have indicated. And that depends very much upon President Putin. And your second question, I would be not so optimistic myself. And I think that the risk, if we don't organize ourselves, I mean, if the middle powers do not organize themselves, the risk is that in the very few months, they could be attracted in new spheres of influence. And that's precisely what we should avoid.
Thank you, Ambassador. Those are very thought-provoking comments and something to certainly reflect upon and work to ensure that there are not increasing spheres of influence which can lead to a even increasingly destabilized world. Ambassador Greminger, if you'd like to answer the previous question and then reflect upon where we likely will stand in 1 year.
Yeah, let me start with your question, Darren. I hope that, middle powers start reflecting more seriously about cooperation formats among themselves. Be they ad hoc formats, be they existing regional organizations, and I hope that in a year's time we are a bit farther than today. On the conflict, look, don't misunderstand me. When I call for patience, this is not implying that I wouldn't want this war to end as quickly as possible. And this is also, why my center, for instance, has been investing heavily in working on ceasefire modalities over the last 3 years. We have been promoting dialogue through a back channel. So, I totally, share your wish that this ends quickly. A famous conflict researcher and negotiator, Bill Sartman, he says, a conflict is then ripe for resolution when the parties perceive a mutually hurting stalemate. My gut feeling tells me we are close to that. But I think we will only see if we have reached that point once we have a structured process, once the parties negotiate seriously. Then we will see if we have reached that. Then we will see if the parties are negotiating in good faith, if they really want to end the war or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And thank you to all of our panelists for a very lively and insightful discussion. I would say if there's one takeaway, it's that middle powers are no longer just balancing between great powers. They will be shaping the rules of the new order in real time. Please join me in thanking our speakers, and if you didn't have an opportunity to ask a question but have one, I encourage you to introduce yourself to the panelists after this as we wrap up. Thank you all for coming.